How supermarkets are designed to make you buy crap and junk food. So yesterday I was at the supermarket with a friend and we went in, and this is the supermarket I usually shop at, and he was like, this supermarket is good for buying junk food and sweets. I asked him why. And this caused a decade of thoughts about how supermarkets are designed to make you buy junk food. So you enter, and in here, in this supermarket layout specifically, you have basically the things you need first. The things you need first are basically there are the different aisles and the different lanes. So here we have the fruits. On the other side we have the vegetables. Now vegetables here, and this is one aisle, one aisle. Now if you take either this or the other one, what becomes clear is, by the way, the middle here is connected. So you can either choose this or this. What becomes clear is that the next thing here is not. So here again we have vegetables, but here what we have is the bakery aisle, basically, where you already can see donuts. On the other side we still have fruits here, but here, and I will now mark all the junk food black. Junk food here. So here we have waffles, we have basically also kind of bakery style things. We have waffles, we have these milk bread things, milk buns, whatever they are called. Okay, that's the first aisle. So you cannot get through one of these aisles or lanes without looking at least at one junk food item. Now, of course you could, but it is very hard to resist. Then we enter the last part of the supermarket, and here what we have is the ready-to-go food, and I will now reduce the size of the aisles to a little bit smaller, even though proportionally they would be the same. So I now adjusted these, and therefore we have crab food here and here. So now if we go further, then we have the ready-to-go food in the refrigerated area. But then we have yogurt and so on and so forth. And here we have also sweetened yogurt and desserts. So therefore we again have junk food here. Then we have a little bit more healthy stuff here. Then the next aisle is basically ready-made refrigerated foods, and there is not that much junk food in there, but you could also argue a lot of it is junk food anyway. So we have things like potato salad, but this potato salad is first of all ready-made, and second of all it has a lot of sugar in it. I already tried it, so well, now the question is obviously, why did I try it, even though I didn't want to try it, and I have been trying to avoid sugar for years, but that's another question. So we have kind of junk food a little bit in here. We have also meat and stuff like this. Then in the next aisle, or let's just take a look at the other side. So the other side entirely at the supermarket is here. Now, if you want to buy meat, and recently I again began eating meat after being vegetarian for 6.5 years, this is where you get the actual meat, the refrigerated meat. And if you go down this route, you obviously have to take either one of these aisles, so here or here, and therefore you already see the sweets. Then you have to either go down here, where you can see these sweets. Then here we have a lot of crab food, basically crab food that is also meat-based, you could say. And then here, what we do have is again healthy options, basically the natural and the organic options. On the other side, we have the frozen vegetables. So I just finished the whole design for you, for your convenience. So now, if you buy meat, you have to go through either one of these lanes, as we already discussed. Then if you want to buy peanuts, for example, so nuts would be pretty healthy, and also if you want to buy lentils and stuff like this, these are here. But what we have here is obviously the peanuts. The peanuts themselves are not really junk food, and also nuts are not that much junk food, but they are kind of healthy junk food, since they tend to have a lot of calories, but also a lot of carbs, so therefore they spike insulin, and also have a lot of calories, so therefore you might potentially get easier overweight from eating nuts, and that's what happened to me partially in the last few years when I tried eating nuts. But let's just say you want the nuts, healthy option, you also want the meat, healthy option. So you go to these nuts, even though these days I don't anymore. But then we actually went to these nuts yesterday, and what became apparent is that this all is ice cream. The whole aisle is ice cream. So you would have these very healthy options. You also find the vinegar, for example, here. I have to go here for olive oil and vinegar. On the opposite side, we have ice cream, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream. Now, we already discussed that in the entry section, opposite from the fruits here, is kind of bakery stuff. So these are kind of buns, cakes, and so on. If you go to the other side, and what you find here is also cakes, basically. Cakes you find in a packaged form. What you also find here is the muesli, but not just the normal muesli, but the muesli with all the sugar in it. So therefore, if you want to buy healthy muesli, it would be here. But here we have all the muesli with sugar in it. Now, of course, this here, for example, is not entirely sweets and junk food. Even though bread is also not that healthy, at least if you compare it to something that is more healthy, like lentils, for example. But here, so this black thing is not entirely black. The same is true for this, even though there is a lot of black portion, so sweets and junk food. There is actually another lane, which I didn't yet include, but I don't have space anymore, so therefore we kind of leave it out, I think. So there is basically another one in between, and this is the only one where you can get to the cash registers without passing by one sweet aisle. So, and within this one, we have protein bars. So these are basically down there, and then we have protein powder and so on and so forth. So you can argue this would be the healthiest option if you want to go through one lane at least without having to see sweets. If you want to try to avoid sweets, that would be a reasonable assumption to try to do it. So if we go down this aisle here, then here we have basically, so here is meat, and here we have soda, we have Coca-Cola, so it's basically trash, you could say. It's something you don't want to put into your body if you're somewhat trying to be healthy. Then here we have still soda. And then here we have sweets, entirely sweets. What we have here is also just sweets. There is nothing healthy in here, absolutely nothing. It's chocolate, it's gummy bears, and so on and so forth. So we have sweets here, entirely this row. We also have sweets here. It's just ridiculous. So to properly include the last aisle I missed out, what we have in this last aisle is we have marmalade here and peanut butter, which also usually includes sugared peanut butter. So you could also argue it's not that healthy. And then we have coffee and bakery stuff. And in the other one, if you then go down this route, we have basically on the bottom here, we have the protein bars, and then we have hygiene stuff and so on and so forth. So that's not really something to look at. So that's the last aisle basically I left out. On the other side of that aisle, what we have is, I think, meat and so on and so forth. Here should be the meat somewhere. Now, in addition to already at least a third of the entire supermarket basically consisting out of things you should avoid, what we also have is on the healthy aisles, every time you basically go here and you want to go here, there are basically additional sweets stored here, somewhere, sometimes here, sometimes here, sometimes here. Also, if you enter the supermarket, in front of the fruits, there is usually one big shelf where they have donuts from yesterday, or donuts that are like packaged basically. So we have additionally sweets stuff here. What we also have is additional aisles here and here, and what we find here is sweets. In the middle there is usually also something sweets. Then we have self-checkout cash registers. What you find on these is usually sweets stacked up on the side of the cash registers. And then we have the main registers. So we have two of these here, or I think it's even only one. And of course also on the side what you do find sweets. So basically the whole supermarket, at least to a third, consists out of sweets. And even if a whole aisle is not sweets, what you usually have is stacked up sweets on the side of the aisles. So basically you could argue that somehow the supermarket wants to convince you to buy crap food. So why would this be so beneficial? The strategy most supermarkets kind of use, of course that's overarching and also only summarized, is the following. Cheap supermarkets want you to go in. And once you're in, you're basically already in the supermarket and you won't go to 10 other supermarkets in the next half an hour. So therefore you buy most things here. So you go to the supermarket for buying something like meat, like dairies, like vegetables, like fruits. And maybe even at a discount. So basically they get you in with the things you want to buy. And these would be maybe even cheaper, so at a discount. And where I go to is a discounter, so this applies, I think, to these. And then, since you are already in the supermarket, you might as well buy the rest of your stuff there. So I actually switched to buying my tissues there. Despite me having cloth tissues now, but I also still have a few normal tissues. My washing powder, for example, I also buy there. So I buy all of these other things also there, which might not be at a discount. But the highest margins is in products where you have cheap ingredients and you don't really understand the product that well. So the thing is here, if you have an apple, everybody has kind of an assumption of what an apple is. But if you have, so therefore an apple can cost something, and probably most people know what an apple costs in normal stores. Maybe anywhere from 25 cents to 75 cents in terms of euros here. So now, what you don't have a good idea on is the value of products that are basically with multiple ingredients. Let's say Milka chocolate or any other chocolate that is 250. Is this a good value? Is this a bad value? How much chocolate should I get? Because here we don't really focus on the nutrient value, but what we focus on is how much pleasure you get from eating the food. So the food, the purpose of the purchase, but also the purpose of eating the food is different, you could argue. So therefore also the value proposition is different. So therefore if you have cheap ingredients and you can make up value by making it packaged nice, so by packaging it nice, what you can do is you can increase the perceived value of an item, and therefore, if you then sell the item and you have a Milka chocolate bar for 2 euros, then compared to the apple that would only cost 65 cents, or compared to the 5 bananas which would cost you maybe 1 euro, this is much more expensive compared to what it actually would sell for in terms of the ingredients. So therefore, it's an upsell. It's a thing you additionally buy. So therefore, increasing what drives revenue ultimately is maybe the overall you appearing at the shop. Because if you didn't appear at the shop, you wouldn't drive revenue. But what drives profit for the people who make, or for the manufacturers of these products, but also for the grocery chains, is not the apple they sell at a discounted price, where they often, Aldi for example, does often not even make profit from these, but they actually sell them at a loss in order to get you in store, in order to then upsell you on basically crap food. Because crap food can be sold at higher margins. So what drives revenue is you getting you into the store. But what drives profit for these companies, and they all already operate on very low margins and very low profit on average, is you buying junk food in any form. And therefore, a normal supermarket looks like this, which is ridiculous if you think about the direct consequences of you spending more. If you think about the secondary consequences of people becoming obese all around the world. If you think about the tertiary and also other consequences, basically there is a multitude of consequences. And this is one of the main problems we have currently as a society. And I also do have this problem in my life of not being able to properly optimize my food and nutrition and approximate the ideal I can come up with. I mean, in every other aspect of life, if you want to do something, then you take the necessary steps. But in this regard, it's just like, oh yeah, but I wanted to eat like 2 bars of chocolate at this specific day. And now we at least partially know why. There are different books on this subject. One is called Nudge. So basically, they designed a cafeteria and they also played around with the different options, placing the fries first, placing the salad first. And what became apparent is that just from the placing, people often took people made different choices. And therefore, the healthier a layout like this is, imagine a supermarket where you just cut out all the junk food. If you live on the moon, then you cannot eat cookies. And if you just have a supermarket, or just within the range of 5 kilometers around where you would live, if there would not be one supermarket that sells junk food or sweets, then chances are you will not eat those usually. And therefore, this whole thing is not a thing about personal choice. It's not a thing about you wanting to eat stuff like this. a part of you wants to eat it because this part of you is kind of independent from you as a rational person. And the rational approach is not to say, oh yeah, there is a child in me and I need to satisfy this child. The rational approach is to design a system, ideally, that gets rid of all the bad choices. Therefore, you don't need willpower to make good choices, because turns out, if you put even the most willpowered person in an environment where willpower is totally required all the time, then eventually the willpower seems to break down. At least there have been experiments where people wanted or needed to do mathematical problems, solve them, and afterwards they needed to choose between a healthy option, a healthy food option, and an unhealthy option. So the more problems, I think the conclusion was, the more problems, or the more drained, so the more problems they solved before, the more they choose the unhealthy option, compared to the ones whose math problems weren't as difficult, or they didn't have to solve any. They had more, the interpretation is that they had more willpower left, and they chose the healthy option more. So the whole thing is system design. Maybe there could be a law where you can only have like a certain amount of items at the store can be unhealthy. Maybe there can be a law at which items with a bad nutrient value that is established and standardized maybe worldwide are just taxed heavier. And the healthier a food is, the less it is taxed. And therefore, the solution, or a potential solution, or a comparably easy solution, is not to try to tell people to make better choices, but to help people make better choices.